Welcome to the Heightened Report. Today we're going to talk about the 10 Commandments. With me today is Claus Dittmer and I am Jaco.
Thanks, Jaco. We're going to discuss the 10 Commandments, like you said, and we hope to give some insight around it and to get you some of your insights as well. We're going to talk about some of the principles which I believe is quite set in stone, literally, and
Carved in stone
carved in stone. And,
with a rock.
Perhaps some other things that there are grey areas, and we hope to get a discussion around those grey areas from you as well. And perhaps we can answer some of the questions that you might have beforehand.
So I actually have a few questions for you, Klaus.
Sure.
Right, first off, what was the original need for the 10 Commandments? Why was it carved and given to the Israelites?
Yeah, I think like any new group that would begin, as they would start out, they would sort of just go with the flow. And obviously certain problems would arise as time goes by. And I think the same was with them. They had a leader as Moses, and they sort of were okay with Moses just giving them orders and them going on. But at one stage, there were certain questions perhaps around certain things, and there weren't any order for it or exact guidelines, direct guidelines for them. So I think there was a need for them to get these guidelines in place, and perhaps a lot like the law of a country. So we can see these things as perhaps the first law they got.
So we're talking about the second time that Moses went up to the Sinai mountain and got the tablets. He went up and he spent 40 days and 40 nights on the top of the mountain. So that's really very interesting, because you will think, all right, it's 10 commandments, it's just 10 lines to carve into a stone. How long will that take? So the interesting thing is, what about the rest of that 40 days? I think he might have used that time to pray, to worship the Lord, maybe do some sacrifices. These aren't really things we see in the Bible. But what do you think? Something had to happen in those 40 days.
Yeah, obviously there's no real detail around it. It's difficult for us to speculate exactly what happened in those 40 days. And if the 40 days may be needed with the equipment he had to perhaps carve into the stones. So perhaps one of you have an answer for us. Me and Jaco have been speaking about it for some time. We don't know exactly what he did up there, how long he needed, but perhaps he was spending some time with God and learning to know Him, and they were improving their relationship. So perhaps that's exactly what they did.
I think that's the most practical way to think about it. Okay, so I just quickly want to point out something interesting before we actually get to the commandments. This was just a bit after the commandments was actually given. In Exodus 33, verse 5, "Therefore now put off thy ornaments from thee, that I may know what to do unto thee." So God actually asked the Israelites to take off all of their jewelry, basically, all the things, their robes and stuff. Could this be something, not a commandment, but something akin to a commandment adjacent, maybe more like a rule or a warning? I'd rather say a warning against earthly things.
Yeah, I think each of the commandments has a certain principle of it. It's not just the commandment and that's the only word. I think each one of them has a certain principle. And as with this, I think God wanted to warn them against earthly things. And through this, you can say through this commandment or the principle you wanted to teach them, you wanted to show them how to move away from that love towards earthly things.
All right, I like that. So there's a lot more to consider than when you're looking at the 10 Commandments. It's within the context. There's a whole lot of things more, but we're going to go into that. We're going to look at the context of the commandments. So I want to know, are there any other versions of the 10 Commandments than what's given in Exodus?
Not that I'm aware of. I think there are certain, perhaps, versions that people discuss, perhaps in the Muslims, They don't have the 10 Commandments all put together, but they discuss certain parts of it throughout the Quran, and I think it's important to note at least. There are, however, Jesus was asked about the 10 Commandments and which commandment is the most important to him. We can read that quickly. It's in Matthew 22, verse 37 to 40. And he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depends all the laws and the prophets." So instead of naming the one commandment or all 10 commandments from top to bottom, Jesus sort of said, okay, well, all of the commandments in one or in two, perhaps. This is the most important.
So he encapsulated the feeling and the meaning behind all of it into basically 2 sentences.
Yeah. If you can say, love your Lord with everything that you've got, you think about the first 4 commandments, which is directed to God, where love your neighbor as you love yourself. You think about the following 6 commandments, your love towards others and not harming others.
So can we say that then the 10 commandments are divided up into 2 main parts? You can say.
I like to think about it that way.
I actually like it like that also. Okay, so just a bit of context about who the author was, who wrote about Moses, about the 10 commandments. Was it Moses himself? Was it someone afterwards?
So there's a lot of speculation around the first few books of the Bible, who wrote them. I definitely think Moses was probably one of the sources that contributed to writing Exodus, as he was perhaps one of the best scholars of that time, maybe perhaps even one of the only people that could properly read and write and those sort of things. So definitely one of the sources. I think there would probably have been other sources as well. You could think about certain things certain data they need to have captured in the temple, things like that could have contributed as well, and perhaps other sources that we don't know of. Who put all of these sources together? I'm not sure.
That's difficult to say. All right, so I don't think we can really say this whole thing is word of mouth, so should we take it with a pinch of salt? No, because the 10 commandments were carved into these 2 tablets, and the tablets were kept in the temple for many, many years.
Yeah.
So they had proof of this. All scholars for many, many years after that, many generations after that, could go look at the stones and actually say, so these are the 10 commandments. So that's what we have today, and I think that's proof enough to know these are accurate. Okay, so let's start off with the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I think this commandment is sort of the main commandment, and everything else flows out of this. This commandment gives the setting of everything to follow. And if we can fully adhere to this commandment, the rest would sort of fall in place by itself. We wouldn't want to break this commandment, or we wouldn't want to break any of the other commandments while still adhering to this commandment. So I think this is the main commandment, although it's a very straightforward one. I think if you go away from this commandment, you're going to move away from the rest of the commandments as well.
So when you praise, when you worship God, the God we're talking about, the one God, then you're going to follow his rules, all of his rules, when you love him. And so the problem being, if you worship another God, another deity, you're going to follow different rules, which may not coincide with the rules of God.
So although I think in a lot of deities there are certain overlapping principles, I guess. So it's not saying that it's going to be totally different, but at some stage you're going to get to a point where it's not the same. And you're going to have to make a point where you have to move in one direction or another. And that's why it's important to stay with one God and stay with his rules, because then you don't have to make that decision. And because I think if you go away from that, it's going to happen sooner than later.
Thou shalt not worship any given image. What do they mean with image? How do you worship an image?
Guys, I think in one of the other versions it says you won't make any other idols or take any idols. I think it's not just making something and put it inside your home and worshipping that thing. I think it's with anything. And I think it's quite obvious, yet we like to put our trust in money.
Mammon.
Worshipping mammon, or put more trust in technology than perhaps needed. I think the important principle here is that first of all, we must put our trust in God. First of all, we must worship God. And with these principles, we can start planning for certain other things. So we don't trust in money, but we plan ahead for our financial needs. We trust in God to assist us in this and to help us plan in these needs.
Okay, so I have questions on that, but first I'd like to, the Old King James Version of the Bible is a bit more descriptive in this. So actually, I'm going to read it quickly. Thou shalt not make thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. So they're graven image. So then we start to think about idols, about statues maybe. So you said, I actually want to ask about that. So someone having a statue of something, of just a woman lying on a beach or a guy fishing, something like that. That's a statue of something on the earth. Is that a problem?
I think having it, there's no problem with it. I want to get back to the principle of it, and it means that we shouldn't put our trust in anything else other than God. And everything we create on earth, anything that's on earth or in the waters or not in heaven, we are created with our own hands, and we can't create something and worship that. God created us and we worship him. So why then would you want to create something and worship that you have created yourself?
Okay, and then I want to get to this superheroes. All right, superheroes. In today's time, we have the term for them as superheroes, but back in antiquity, in the time of the Bible, they wouldn't have called it that. They didn't have the word superheroes. They had deities or gods. So having superheroes today, comic book superheroes, could they be seen as deities? Could our infatuation with superheroes today be something akin to worshipping a deity and having figurines, action figures or statues or something of a superhero in your house? How about that?
Yeah, thinking about action figures and things like that, I think it could be quite problematic if you start worshipping it. With that said, I think it can be a problem, absolutely.
If it's an infatuation,
yes,
of course, yes.
That's why I said it's all about the principle for me. If you're having something because it looks nice and you like the way it looks and you like it to stand there, I don't really see any problem with it. It's all about what it means to you. If you have a relationship with that action figure and you speak to it like it gives meaning to your life, I think you've got a problem.
So there is a dangerous point that you
yes,
can reach.
Yes, absolutely.
The thing is, the stories about superheroes, it's based on the concept of an epic, of fiction, of an epic story. And fiction is just stories we tell each other. And that started even in the Bible time. They had stories they told each other, fictional stories. So watching superhero movies, I don't really have a problem with that, or reading comic books. But yeah, having an unhealthy infatuation with it, that it actually leads you away from God, I think that's where the problem
I think
comes in.
there's always important lessons to learn in these kind of stories.
And then I'd also actually just like to say TV stars, movie stars, pop stars, that might also be a problem. You have an image of them on your phone, you have a poster or something. If you become infatuated with that, that's going to be a problem. If it's just, oh, I enjoy this person's movies, I like the way they approach it, that'll be fine. I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think
that's not worshipping.
Having idols and having something to look up to is always something we can talk about in the future. But I think it gets down to how you look at it and what kind of influence you allow it to have on you, and how it can create a problem.
I just want to say quickly, we might have to fire our cameraman. He keeps barking.
Stupid cameraman.
Stop that. Stop that. All right.
He's a bit sick. He's got a cough.
Okay. We'll forgive you. Okay, then the third commandment. Thou shalt not take God's name in vain.
Yeah, I think this commandment is quite clear. Actually, it's been
many people struggle with
controversial topic between Christians and non-Christians. It's quite clear.
Christians do that as well. It's become a culture in using God's name.
To me, it's quite clear. Actually, if we're not speaking to God, why would we use His name?
And the context you're using it in, it lowers the importance of that name, the weight of that name. I think that's a real problem.
If we call ourselves children of God and we disrespect God's name, what sort of image does that give to the rest of the world? But I think, to be fair, it would be true that if you love God with all of your heart, would you really say this? And would you? And I know for some people it has become a sort of a motion they go through. They don't even think about saying it. The oh my God slips through, and it doesn't mean anything. But if we really have a good relationship with God, and if we truly love God, would we want to do that?
It goes on, especially the King James Version. I just prefer the King James Version. It's a more pure version for me personally. And it goes on to say, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. It's made very clear that you are going to be punished if you use God's name in vain. Yeah. You can be forgiven if you stop doing it, if you say, listen, I'm so sorry about this, I'm not going to do this, but really can't keep on doing it. It's actually a really big one for me. This is why it's the third one on this list of the 10 commandments, because I think it's just so important.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
The fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. The Sabbath day, which in today's age we use it as a Sunday. It can also be used as a Saturday.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Sabbath?
I think we can go on about this topic for days. And I think in Eastern Christianity, they use the Saturday as the Sabbath, as was in the original culture used. In Catholicism and Protestantism, we use the Sunday. But I think the important thing to remember with this is that we have a day that we put aside to honor the Lord. Yeah, I think in that time they would overwork their slaves and they would overwork their cattle and their children.
Yeah.
So I think it was needed for them to have a commandment and say, but
give them some rest. Give them some time to praise God.
You have to give them rest and you have to give them a chance to improve their relationship with God. I think what is still due for today is that we have a day that we put aside for God and to thank Him for everything that happened in the past 5 or 6 days, and ask Him to get a chance to reflect on those things. I think not just spiritually, but health-wise, it's good for a person.
I think with the advent of Christianity becoming more popular, having become more popular, I think it's become more a thing of praise God every day, every minute of every day. Whenever you get a chance, just talk to God. And so this thing of take a whole day just for worship, yes, you can do that. Obviously, that'll be amazing. But we have the relationship we have with God now in Christianity, in our culture of Christianity. We talk to Him more often whenever we get a chance, whenever we want to. And I think that's really good. I think that's almost a little better. So yeah, take a time where you can rest. But I think this commandment was more given with a focus on the slaves and things like that, just so they have a chance to take a break. So in work today, luckily most companies give people a day off, usually Sunday, and that's very good. So in today's with today's standard, it is still applicable. It is still applicable. Give those people just a day off. But for people that don't work normal 9 to 5 jobs, I think every day you can take some time and just worship. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. So let's go on to the 5th commandment. Honor thy father and thy mother. What does honoring your father and your mother actually mean?
I think what's important for this part is that our relationship with God, we like to refer to God as our Father, as our Heavenly Father. And I think this commandment just shows something about that, about our relationship with God is reflected in our relationship with our parents, because the natural way is for a parent to love their children in a way that can't really be expressed properly. And I think God's love is even more so. I think we can't even begin to imagine. And that's why we honor God, is because He created us and He loves us in a way that we can't even begin to imagine. We think we know until you get your own children and you think for a moment, oh, my parents love me this much, and some things become clearer. I think there's a lot of controversial things that we can discuss about it, but I think the important thing is to focus on the relationship between us as children of God and our physical parents on earth as well, and to give them the honor that they deserve at least.
The thing is, the conversation can be had that what if your mother or your father is a bad influence, they're bad people, what if they mislead you in your religion? Should you still honor them? I think yes. The commandment is very clear on this. It doesn't say, oh, there's a gray area. It says, honor your parents. And I think even if you don't have all that much respect for them, or you don't feel you should follow their way, you maybe more want to follow Christianity in a different manner, whatever the reason is, the thing is still, in a certain manner, you need to honor your father and your mother. You have to have some level of respect for them. You cannot disrespect them. That is what being a God-loving person is, I think. Loving people that, let's not even talk about parents, let's just talk about your enemy, someone who did something wrong to you. You still need to have love for that person. You still need to honor them. The same with your parents. So I think this is really straightforward. Just honor your father and your mother.
Yeah.
And you'll be good. All right. So we go on to the sixth commandment, which is a very interesting one for me. Thou shalt not kill. First off, what can you say about that before I get into it?
Well, to me, it's pretty straightforward, but perhaps you can make it more interesting for us.
All right. So I've heard the distinction between killing and murdering in speaking about this commandment, thou shalt not kill, where people might say, and I understand when they say this, killing would be something akin to killing in a war, doing it for a specific reason, or in self-defense. Someone's attacking you and you kill, or there must be some kind of reason. Then murdering is just doing away with a person's life for an abhorrent reason, for a really bad reason. That's murdering. So that's maybe the kill that they're talking about, thou shalt not kill. And I'll refer to, I like the story of King David. King David was, in the Bible, an amazing man. And you can feel assured to say, yeah, he probably went to heaven. He was so close to God. But he was involved in many wars and killed many people. So does that count towards this commandment, thou shalt not kill?
Yeah, I think it opens up a whole discussion around that. If we think on certain countries that have the death sentence, if one person is sentenced to death because they killed someone, the person that sentenced them to death needs to be killed as well.
Isn't that as well in Moses' time? They also, if someone they killed someone, the death sentence.
Yeah, you would get the death sentence.
So in the time the commandments was actually written, yeah.
So I think it's different. It's quite difficult to put a line and say this is killing and this is murder. But I think when there's a certain and a definitive rule against it, the country's laws might set it quite apart quite easily. But I think there is a line to pull, a difference between killing and murder, I guess, if you think about soldiers of a country, where they are ordered to go to war. I think in a certain sense it's difficult to see the principle of thou shalt not kill, while it's their work to literally go to war. It
makes it a very difficult decision.
But it makes it a difficult discussion. Perhaps one of you can elaborate on the topic and give us some insight on it. But I do think from my side there's a difference between killing and murder. Perhaps it could be read thou shalt not murder. And
the thing is, I don't think from the translation, you might know a bit more about the translation. Remember, it wasn't originally written in English. So the translation, they might not have had a word or two words distinctive from each other.
In the English Standard Version, it reads "Thou shalt not," or "You must not commit murder." And I think in some of the other translations, it might even be a bit different. But I definitely think there's some discussion there. I like to, as he likes to read the King James Version, I like to read the English Standard Version. So there they specifically talk about murder. And I think there's a lot to say about it. Perhaps something we can start a discussion on.
But it'll never be the right thing if you choose to kill.
Yeah.
If you choose, call it what you want. If you choose to go out and do this, then you know it's wrong.
Yeah, I think in principle it's wrong to kill. But perhaps there is some gray area around that. So there is some interpretation and some laws of a country that might change this. I think although the laws of a country might still have certain influence on it, I think the main thing is if a law of a country goes directly against God's will, that's when it's becoming a problem.
So this thou shalt not kill, along with the next few commandments, you said something about the four of them.
Yes, I think the next four to follow is a lot to do with the country's laws. And most, if not directly a law against this, a lot of countries have a law against this in a certain direction. We look at adultery, stealing, false evidence. You're not allowed to give false evidence in a court of law. As if I'm giving false evidence against someone, it can be considered a crime as well. So these four commandments, I think, is quite clear in most countries that it's a crime, and it's something that can become a problem with your general safety in a country if you go against this. So not just in the 10 commandments, I think these four especially.
Okay, so let's actually look at the 7th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. What is defined as adultery specifically?
Adultery is seen as when there's at least one participant is married to someone else, and there's that person, I guess you can say, cheats on their partner, on their spouse. I think that's seen as adultery, but I like to take it a bit further and
so that's a traditional sense of it. If you're married or someone else is married,
Adam knew Eve, and that they bore.
I remember that. Yes.
That they bore a child. So the relationship between them is rather seen as their marital status, not their sexual act is not seen as their marital status. So I think it's interesting to note that the sexual act is not what's referred to as their marital status, but rather their relationship to each other. Later on, contracts and all of these things came. But go and read the article. I hope you find it quite interesting. But to get back to the adultery, I think that sort of relationship makes it quite clear that we are set for a relationship between two people. And when we break that or get another party involved, that's when the problem comes in.
So in this case, it's not just marriage. It's maybe a promise you make to someone to be with that person. So a relationship, just dating someone. If you you have relations with another person that's in a relationship with someone else, or you're in a relationship, that's also adultery. Correct. What about when you're single and other people are single and you have relations with other people? Nobody's in a relationship or a marriage. Does that constitute adultery?
I think to a certain sense, yes. When you get to the principle of it, I think it can be seen as adultery. You would want to be the right person for your future spouse, maybe, or to that special person. You would want to be their only person, their only image, perhaps. Or
the concept is you are partaking in relations with multiple people. In some way, there has to be some trust, some intimacy when you're with a person, and you're breaking that trust and that intimacy, even if you're not dating, and you go on to another person quickly. I think that's really close to that, and I think it should be grouped together. Just the whole concept, adultery is sleeping around when it comes down to it, and that might be wrong. That is wrong.
Yeah.
If we look at the 10 Commandments. All right, are you happy with that one? Let's go on then. So then the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. What can you tell me?
I think it's quite an obvious one.
Also one of the country's laws, very obvious when you think about it.
Very obvious if you think about it. Yet I think you wouldn't want someone else to take your things. It's just like hurting someone in a less physical way, I guess. Just as you wouldn't want someone to physically assault you, you wouldn't want someone to take your things, your belongings.
You are damaging a person, you are setting them back.
Yeah.
There's somewhat to say about it, but it's very straightforward. Just don't steal. Some of these aren't really that, you need to interpret this. Yeah. It's very straightforward. So let's just go with that.
You wouldn't want it to be done to you. So
yeah. All right. So thou shalt not bear false witness. Explain to me the difference or the comparability of false witness and lying. Is it the same thing? Is it different?
I think there's a fine line, but I think it comes down to the same thing. Mm-hmm. The principle of it comes down to the same thing. I don't think there's much interpretation that can go into it. Perhaps someone else might feel different. But I think when you are bearing a false witness on someone, you are accusing them of something they didn't do. It's just as good as that you do that thing, exact same thing that you accuse them of. Because if it's not true, they will have certain things happen to them because of it. And you wouldn't want it to happen to you if you didn't.
So they might act upon something that you said, you misled them, a falsehood, and they would do something. All right.
So a false witness is a lie. Bearing a false witness is a lie, and giving false evidence is a lie. So giving false evidence about a situation I think is just as good as you doing that exact same thing.
Again, I think it comes back to you are actually harming someone. Even if you think this isn't that much of a lie, it's a little white lie. In the end, you break someone's trust, you might hurt them, they might believe something, and it will affect them somewhere along the line. You just think you just said something and you forget about it. You never think about it again. 10 years from now, they still think about this, they remember something, and they lived in this falsehood. You don't know what effect it has. So I think that's what it comes down to. Don't hurt other people. Yeah. That's what this whole section of the 10 Commandments is.
Yeah, if we pull it back to even the beginning of the 10 Commandments, we are all created in God's image. So indirectly, if I bear a false witness to you, if I lie to you, I lie to God as well. You are created in God's image. So whatever I do, indirectly, I do it to God as well. And that's why it's important for us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, and to respect our neighbors as we respect God. Because if we lie to one another, or if we give false witness to one another, it's like doing it to God as well.
Let's quickly, I want to define thy neighbors. neighbors in the time it was written, obviously they had set up their tents, or living in their brick houses or whatever, mortar houses. They were very close together. It was a tight-knit community, so neighbors was just the people around them.
General term, perhaps. Yeah.
Now in modern times, neighbor is so much bigger. Now with technology, we can communicate with someone across the globe.
Yeah.
I think neighbor is, well, obviously just anyone. So keep that in mind. It's not just people in your general vicinity.
It's not your brothers and sisters in your religion. It's not the person we can pull it through to anyone, because everyone is created in God's image.
Doesn't matter what your culture
is.
Yeah, okay, I agree totally with that. So the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. And the King James Version takes it a little further. Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's house, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's. All right, Klaus, can you maybe explain to me, what does the word covet mean?
Yeah, I think in the English Standard Version they talk about envy.
They specifically use the word envy instead of covet.
Yes, especially, they use the word envy, and they don't use jealousy. And I think we can go on a big discussion about envy and jealousy. I think envy is more focused on that you want something else that someone else has, where jealousy focuses more on you don't want that person to have what they have.
Okay, so I like the cell phone you have. I'm envious of you. I want to have a cell phone like that at some point. But you have that cell phone. I don't want you to have that cell phone. I want that cell phone. That's jealousy, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So is there going to be a problem being envious? It doesn't seem like it's that bad.
Yeah. This commandment has been a problem for me as well. I tend to think there's nothing wrong with it, being envious of someone else. And I think there's sort of a gray area perhaps on this as well, because if someone else has a good characteristic or a good trait, you see, I like how this person can endure. I'm envious of that ability to endure through things. I think there's sort of a good thing that you can take from that as well. So perhaps it's not all bad, but I think where there's problems is that God has given us everything we need to survive. The Bible is quite clear on this. And when we envy what other people have, we pretty much saying that God hasn't given me enough to survive through this. I want what God has given that person as well. And I think it becomes a problem around that we distrusting God and pretty much saying that He hasn't given me enough. I want more than what He's given me.
Well, I think the problem actually comes in with the word that is being used. That's why we refer back to different versions of the Bible. The word covet is more a bad word for me. I want that. That's like a bad thing. Like, I want to get that from you. I don't want you to have that. I think this covet is more in relation to jealousy, where
or
I'm
perhaps
not sure about
envious and jealousy together.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, it might be. And so, but the thing is about envious, when you think about it, it might actually be positive. But obviously, when speaking about the 10 Commandments, it's meant in the negative way. Yeah. You can be envious in a negative way, which I think is more jealousy if you want to make. But I think jealousy and envious is actually so close to each other. In this context, it's the same thing. This is meant in a bad way.
Yeah. I think the principle of this commandment is that you wish something bad upon someone, and that's the problem with it. You're not just hoping for well-being on yourself, you're wishing that someone else gets affected by it in a negative way, and that's the problem about it. Thinking about your neighbors or your the people around you, hoping something bad upon them, hoping something bad happens to them.
Just so something good can come your way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually want to coveting anything. The concept here is just don't covet anything, but it specifies on your neighbor's wife, the ox, which would be like a car today. What about if you see someone in the street, someone from across a crowded room, and you want to be with that person, you like that person, that is coveting, if we're getting down to it. But you're single, that person is single, you want that person, you're coveting that person. Is that a problem?
I think there's a fine line in our desires, whether we really, when those desires get to between our relationship with God, it becomes a problem. So it can be, absolutely. I think whatever we do, we should consult God on these things beforehand, before we act upon these things, and before we give in to certain desires that we don't fully understand, because these desires can be negative. As you've said, not all of these desires and not all of these envious feelings are negative. There are good things that can come of it. But I think we should step lightly and make sure that we are not getting envious towards something or desiring something or someone that can become between our relationship with God.
So there can be a healthy way to maybe more if you say like, I have this goal. I have a goal to drive this car one day. I'm going to work toward that. Yeah. That's going to improve your life. But it's not an unhealthy way that, yeah, we've just mentioned all the bad ways it can be. But like if you see a person that you're interested in, of course, that's how it's going to work. That's how you're going to find someone, start talking to someone, you're going to start dating and maybe get married one day. So I think that's a natural process to get there. In that way, coveting someone isn't bad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's important to have goals, and I think goals are a good way of growing, and not just physically and emotionally, but spiritually as well. When we have these goals to work towards too, it can help our relationship with God as well.
All right. So just don't have an unhealthy infatuation with something.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say around the 10 Commandments, Klaus?
No, only that it was quite interesting for me to see it in the light of Matthew 22 and the way the Pharisees went to Jesus with it and his calm way of acting towards it. He did not try to lie about it. He did not try to just look at one commandment in their way of trying to get him into trouble. He found a calm outcome to still get through it and to say, but in the end, all of it is equal important, because it all gets to the one principle that we need to honor God and that we need to love him as our one and only God. And that still, it takes to the first commandment, it takes it all together. It sets the tone for everything to follow.
I'm very glad you brought up now. Sorry, what's the book it's in? Is it Matthew?
Matthew 22.
I'm glad you brought this up, talking about Jesus, because the question would obviously become, this was written, the 10 Commandments was written and given to the Israelites in Moses' time, which is so long ago. Is that applicable today? Well, the teachings of Jesus is meant to go on until the end of time. It's supposed to be applicable now in modern times as well. So Jesus made a point, and the Bible makes a point to tell us that Jesus went and focused on the 10 Commandments, and Hav gave a new perspective on it, that it's about loving thy neighbor and loving God in the end. Yeah. And so that just says that it is still applicable today. The 10 Commandments is still applicable. It is, I think, the first law that we need to follow in our lives. Before any other law, we need to focus on the 10 Commandments, our relationship with God. And I think living your life with the 10 Commandments in mind and striving after completing, fulfilling the 10 Commandments, that's going to lead to a life that when you die, you'll be happy, and you might go to heaven. I don't know what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying, right?
No. Right. Yeah, if I can break it down a bit, I think the way it's not that anything in the Old Testament has become irrelevant. I think there are certain principles but because of the way things were in that time, and Jesus helped us to understand those principles. just as in this text in Matthew 22, he shows us that these are the principles in the Old Testament, and especially of the Ten Commandments, that we need to understand. There are a lot of detail around it, and to get away from those gray areas, follow this and you'll be okay. And these two basic principles of loving God with your whole heart and your whole soul, and loving your neighbor as yourself, helps to guide your life in the direction where these 10 commandments is possible.
All right. I'm happy with that. Thank you, Klaus, for giving us a bit of view on this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please comment, send us messages, any questions you have, anything you'd like to add. We will get back to you, and we might have another conversation about that. And so, yeah, that's that for us. And thank you guys for watching. This was The Heightened Report.